it's time to look at some more frequently used kinds of price discrimination. We'll start with what is called second-degree price discrimination, or what I sometimes like to call indirect price discrimination. So as I say here, the basic idea is that we need buyers to tell us what their willingness to pay is, because the basic idea is that the firm doesn't know. It can't look at the individuals and come up with any kind of prediction about their willingness to pay or how price sensitive they might be. So what we have to come up with are some strategies to get them to make choices that reveal something about their characteristics. Let's consider a series of examples. A familiar one is what we'll call quality choices. That is, the firm can offer a product, but that product can have different levels of quality or different features associated with it. So you could have like the basic product, and then you could have enhanced versions of different kinds. Now, I'm going to claim, you can see if you can come up with any exceptions, that the higher quality of version we've got, the greater the profit contribution that we should get from that. In other words, the greater should be the gap between the price that we're charging for a higher quality product and the marginal cost of producing it. The basic idea there is that it doesn't make much sense to sell a higher quality version if we could get a greater profit contribution from the more basic product. So what we're trying to do is to separate the customers into those who have either different tastes or those who are more or less price sensitive. So those who are less price sensitive might be inclined to buy the higher quality version. The higher price isn't going to put them off. That greater gap between price and marginal cost doesn't lead them to think that this is a bad bargain or something like that. And of course, they don't know the firm's marginal costs anyway. Well, what I'll start by doing is to consider just the basic theory here, and then I'll give you a few examples. So suppose we can illustrate the demand for our higher quality product and our lower quality product like this. I'm going to presume that, as usual, that the firm knows what the demand for its product looks like so that it can set the optimal price in each case. So for the lower quality product, we can see that we're going to charge the price PL for low quality, and that's going to give us a certain profit contribution. So that'll be the profit maximizing price for that version of the product, and we're going to leave the consumers with some consumer surplus. So this is obviously different from the case of perfect price discrimination, when we try and grab all of that consumer surplus. What we're doing here is trying to, instead of offering just a single version of the product, we're trying to offer different versions so that in total we can have a greater profit contribution than if we had simply produced one single version, maybe something intermediate between these two types. So for higher quality product, obviously we're going to charge a higher price, and that's going to give us a greater profit contribution, while still leaving the consumers with some surplus. Now you'll notice that the way I've drawn it here, I've got the greater profit contribution coming from the higher price, while acknowledging at the same time that we've got higher costs of production. That's inevitable if we're going to offer a higher quality product, something with some extras in some sense. But the point is that the higher price is going to more than offset the increased marginal cost. Well, let's just consider some familiar examples. Back in the days when I used to own a car, a Honda Civic was my car of choice, and I looked up what was available from Honda Canada these days. You can have a basic Honda Civic. This is a manual drive car, and it starts from $24,000. And as those of you who have ever purchased a car know, you start off with kind of the most basic version of the model, and then you can add on various things, maybe a heated steering wheel or air conditioning or whatever it may be, whatever does not come standard with the car. I might just add that there's a little bit of psychology involved in those add-ons that you can have with any particular model. So the psychology behind it is that when you look at a price like $24,000, mentally you consider that to be a loss. And if I tell you, well, for an extra $100 you can have some little gizmo put in the car, that additional $100 is going to look fairly small. That's an additional $100 loss that will be your mental accounting. So your loss will go from $24,000 to $24,100, let's say. So the way you'll think about that extra $100 cost is that it's a relatively small fraction of the $24,000. If you walked into a store just to buy that gizmo, as I call it, some gadget that's going into the car, and you saw it priced at $100, your mental accounting is starting at zero. So you'll look at that and you'll think, well, that's thing costs $100. That looks expensive. But in the context of already having lost $24,000 in buying the car, the extra $100 looks fairly small. So this is just a way of saying that extra profit contribution can be had by adding things on to an existing price. To digress for a moment, this is why, for example, when people are selling you something like an expensive airplane ticket, they'll try and sell you some insurance after you've bought the ticket. And that insurance is going to be outrageously priced. So there'll be a high profit contribution there. You should stay away from those things. Well, to get back to my example here, we've got our basic Honda Civic, and then you add the word sport to it, give it a snappy color, and add a little bit of different trim on it, maybe different wheels that look nicer, and you start by charging an extra $4,000 for this car. But you can see, if you look at the basics of the car, there's going to be an awful lot of overlap between what's in here and what's in here. So the marginal cost of producing this version is going to be relatively small. If you take a further step up, called sport touring, I don't know why the word touring is used, but there you go, then you can pay from $32,000 upwards. And of course, within these, there are all kinds of other variations as well, between manual drive and automatic and so on. Okay, well, that kind of variation of a product is something that's quite familiar. You often see this as well with software. So this is the example of a piece of software called LipSurf. It's an add-on that can go onto Chrome, and it allows you to speak to the browser, and as you can see, even the free version, you can give over 100 commands, and it will do things just using your voice so that you don't have to type. So you can see that there's a free version, and then you can have enhanced versions where you pay a small amount per month. And you can see that in addition to the features of the free version, you have other things. You can, for example, program in commands in another language if you would prefer not to use English, and so on. So there's extra things added on here, but again, the core of the program is going to be the same as the free version. You just have some extra add-ons here, and if you want the premium version, you have some more extra features as well. But again, presumably, the extra add-ons are can be done with relatively low marginal cost. Well, in fact, actually it's probably all fixed cost here, but this is going to allow you to capture people who've got both different levels of need, but also different levels of willingness to pay. My final example, you'll be familiar with the way that books are marketed. So I looked up this book called The Opium War. Subtitle is Drugs, Dreams, and the Making of Modern China. So this deals with the Opium War of 1839, lasted until about 1842. But it also deals with the way in which the memory of that experience in China in the 19th century has been used by the Chinese Communist Party to shape the kind of nationalism that it wants to develop in China. Well, anyway, an interesting book. I won't go into the details of its contents. Well, this book is no longer available in hardcover, but when it was, the hardcover price was about twice the price of the paperback, maybe a little bit less than twice. The marginal cost of producing a hardcover book, I should just add that the hardcover versions available now, if you want to buy it used, a few people have kept new hardcover copies and are charging ridiculous prices. The marginal cost of producing a hardcover book as opposed to a paperback book is really just a few dollars. It may be, for a textbook, it's probably of the order of maybe $15 or $20 For a smaller book like this, probably less than that. But you're targeting people who want either higher quality, more durable book, or people who are less price sensitive, and they'll be willing to buy a hardcover. Often you may have noticed that hardcover books come out before the paperback book does. So sometimes you may have to wait a year or more before the paperback book comes out. So if you want the book right away, you'll have to pay a higher price. And then, of course, the electronic book, which has almost zero marginal cost, is sold for considerably less. But, of course, there are people who prefer to have a real book in paper. So you're discriminating in price for what is essentially the same book, but just slightly different. The contents are the same, but we have different quality levels.